It starts with a driveway and a simple decision. Tim Bosma was a husband and a father. Like many of us, he used an online website to sell something. He had a pickup truck for sale. Someone had messaged him and asked to come by that evening to look at it. Two men arrived after dark. Tim stepped outside for a quick test drive while his wife held the door open behind him. He says he'll be right back, but he isn't. Not in an hour, not by midnight. And while neighbors sleep and traffic hums on the highway, something else begins to move across southern Ontario. Search teams, police cruisers, and a rising sense that something is very wrong. A man is missing. And the story behind that missing truck is nothing like what it first appeared to be. A cool spring evening settles over a quiet neighborhood. Porch lights glow. A lawnmower hums somewhere far down the block. It's the kind of night that feels predictable, steady, safe. Inside one home, the routine is familiar. Dishes drying on a rack, laundry folded on the couch, a forgotten coffee cooling on the table. Everything about this evening feels normal. He scrolls through messages on his phone about the pickup truck he's been trying to sell. Nothing strange. A few quick replies. One buyer wants to come by tonight. It's late, sure, but people work odd hours. People buy and sell vehicles this way all the time. When the vehicle finally turns onto the street, its headlights sweep across the driveway. Two men step out. Quiet, polite, calm, unremarkable in every way that matters, and in a way that matters too much. There's a moment, barely a flicker, where something doesn't feel quite right. Not danger, just imbalance. A rhythm off by half a beat. He shakes it off. The men walk around the truck. They ask the usual questions: fuel mileage, highway handling, a bit of small talk. His wife watches from the doorway, arms folded against the chill. She doesn't say a word, but something about the timing feels off to her too. He grabs the keys, tells her he won't be long. The door closes behind him. Moments later, the truck rolls away, taillights disappearing into the dark. Inside the house, everything settles back into stillness. The TV murmurs. A phone sits on the counter, waiting. Nothing feels urgent. Not yet. But within the hour, this quiet street will feel different. And soon, a single question will reach far beyond this neighborhood. How does a man vanish from his own driveway? The first hour passes quietly. Too quietly. Inside the house, a phone lights up. No message, no call. Just the time, later than it should be. At first, it's small things. Checking the window, refreshing the messaging app, stepping outside to listen for the familiar rumble of a truck that should already be home. Nothing. The street is empty. Another hour slips by. Now there's a feeling in the air. Something heavier, something that doesn't fit the routine of an ordinary night. Calls go out. Messages sent, straight to voicemail. The search begins quietly, almost politely. A drive around the block, a detour past the main road, a glance into parking lots and side streets. This is what people do when they're still convincing themselves everything is fine, but the truck is nowhere. And then the shift happens. The moment when worry becomes certainty. A family reports him missing. Police start asking questions. Neighbors turn on their porch lights as officers move up and down the street, knocking on doors. Hours earlier, this was a neighborhood settling in for the night. Now, it's a staging ground, the early edge of something much larger. Within hours, the search widens beyond the street, then beyond the neighborhood, then beyond the city. Cruisers fan out across rural back roads and highways. Volunteers join in. Social media explodes with the first posts. A missing man, a truck, and two strangers no one can place. The first press statements tighten the tension. Police don't say much, but what they don't say speaks louder. This isn't a man who walked away. This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't a delay. Something else happened on that test drive. Something that's already spreading across southern Ontario. A growing belief, quiet at first, but rising with every passing hour. He should have come home by now, and he didn't. By morning, the search will pull in more officers, more tips, more panic. and before long, investigators will uncover the first clue that changes everything. A clue that leads them straight to a name and the beginning of a story no one was prepared for. As the search expands, police start pulling at threads. Phone records, tower hits, surveillance footage, anything that might explain how a man could vanish in the middle of an ordinary night. One piece finally stands out. A number, a name attached to it. A man with resources, vehicles, money, and a reputation that doesn't match the quiet suburb where the test drive began. Investigators dig further, and the moment they start looking into him, they find something else. Something strange. He doesn't live like most people. He drifts between homes, warehouses, hangars, empty rural properties. He surrounds himself with friends who follow him everywhere and answer his calls at any hour of the night. And no one seems to know exactly what he does. The deeper police go, the more unsettling the picture becomes. This isn't someone who simply replied to a truck ad. This is someone with money, influence, and a lifestyle wrapped in secrecy. A man who grew up around private jets and multi-million-dollar businesses, but seemed to spend most of his time drifting. And he's not alone. There's another name connected to him. A smaller presence, a shadow trailing behind the first. Someone quieter, rougher around the edges, always nearby, but never fully visible. When police map their movements, something clicks. The two men from the driveway didn't appear out of nowhere that night. They'd been circling around Tim's home multiple times, driving slowly, checking routes, noticing patterns. This wasn't spontaneous, it wasn't impulsive, and it wasn't the first time they'd answered an ad for a truck. Investigators soon learned that, earlier that same week, another man had gone on a test drive with these two, and survived only because he followed his instincts and ended the ride early. He remembered the tattoo on one man's wrist, a single word, ambition. That detail becomes a turning point. It links the men from Tim's driveway to a pattern of behavior that suddenly seems too organized, too deliberate, and too practiced to be anything but planned. Then police uncover something far more disturbing. Months before that driveway, months before that night, months before the missing person posters went up, there was another missing person, a young woman who vanished without explanation, a name investigators had seen before, but only in the cold case files where no one expected to find a connection. And that's when the story widens, when the edges blur, when the investigators searching for a missing husband realize they might be dealing with men who've crossed the line into violence long before this night, because by the time Tim met them, they had already killed before. When investigators zero in on their suspect, the search shifts from neighborhood streets to something much stranger, a remote property outside Waterloo, surrounded by fields and gravel roads, the kind of place where the night feels heavier, and secrets settle deep. Officers move in quietly at first, documenting everything, taking note of every vehicle, every outbuilding, every track in the dirt. Then they see it, a large metal machine sitting beside one of the barns. Industrial, heavy, out of place. They're told it's an incinerator, the kind used to dispose of animal remains on farms. But this property has no livestock, no pens, no animals at all, just the machine. Officers approach carefully. It's cold. The metal stained, the interior dark. A forensic officer climbs up, leans over the edge, and shines a light inside. And in that beam, she sees something small, pale, and unmistakable. Later, she describes the moment in court. When I first looked down, I saw a bone. A forensic anthropologist is brought in. She studies the fragments, the burned material, the ash. Her first impression is quiet but devastating. Preliminary opinion, human. Around the incinerator, investigators find more clues. Charred remains, metal scraps, burned debris that shouldn't be there. And near the house, another discovery. Tim's truck, hidden, its vehicle identification number, altered, fingerprints wiped, but not perfectly. One print survives and is a 28-point match. Inside one of the barns, they find clothing, shell casings, tools, a set of instructions for the very incinerator they're standing beside, and on a phone, recovered from the suspect's circle of friends, a video. A recording of one man performing a rap verse that references fire, bodies, and cleaning up evidence. None of it on its own is enough, but together it forms a map. A story told in burned steel, digital traces, phone pings, and the quiet certainty of forensic science. Police don't find a body that day. Not in the way families pray for, not in a way anyone wants to describe, but they find enough. Enough to know what happened. Enough to believe that the violence didn't begin on the driveway. It began long before, and followed a pattern already set in motion. And as investigators piece together what happened at that farm, they realize they're not just working a missing person case. They're closing in on something much darker. A trail that leads from a burned-out machine in a barnyard to a courtroom packed with evidence, and a story that will shock the entire country. The arrests of Dylan Mill-Erd and Mark Smitch happen quickly once the evidence lines up. But the courtroom battle that follows is anything but simple. This isn't one defendant, it's two men, sitting side by side, each insisting the other pulled the trigger, each trying to peel away responsibility, each telling a different story about what happened inside that truck. From the start, the trial feels heavy. There's the forensic evidence, the fingerprint match, the burn material from the incinerator, the attempts to hide the truck. There's the digital trail, phone records, texts, movements that place both men together at every critical moment. And there are the stories, told under oath, of men who circled the neighborhood multiple times before the test drive. Stories of an earlier failed attempt with another buyer. Stories that make the tragedy feel less like chance and more like intent. The jury listens to days of testimony. They hear the tenant describe the two strangers as odd. They hear the man from the earlier test drive describe the tattoo, ambition, etched on the wrist of one of the suspects. Then comes the moment the courtroom tightens, when the Crown explains how the plan might have unfolded. A test drive late at night, a remote turn in the dark, a gunshot inside the cab of a moving truck, and afterward, the machine sitting in the barnyard waiting for its purpose. But the most intricate part of the trial isn't the evidence. It's the way the two defendants shape their stories. One claims he never touched the gun. The other claims he only watched. Their versions shift and dodge. Their stories split apart in ways that expose more than they hide. The judge's instructions to the jury are clear. Weigh the evidence against each man separately. Do not let one man's behavior convict the other by association. Focus on proof, not on personality. Days pass. Closing arguments cut back and forth, measured, cold, and relentless. And then the jury leaves the room. Hours later, the verdict comes down. First-degree murder. Guilty on all counts. Inside the courtroom, there is no celebration. Just the sound of people breathing, relief, grief, exhaustion, the heavy quiet that follows the end of a long storm. But the story doesn't end here, because while this trial only covers one night, one driveway, one family, the truth now sits in full view. These men were not acting for the first time. They had already crossed the line with a young woman months earlier. One of them had already killed within his own family, and the violence that took Tim did not begin with him. It was a pattern, a progression, a series of choices that led, step by step, to the moment a man walked outside to sell his truck and never returned. The verdict stands. Appeals rise and fall, and the story becomes part of Canadian legal history. A case examined in law schools, appellate courts, and investigative files across the country. But for the people sitting in that courtroom, and for the family he left behind, the meaning is simpler and far more human. Justice said what happened, but justice can't bring Tim home to his family. In the weeks that follow the verdict, the noise around the case begins to fade. Reporters pack up their gear, the courtroom empties. The daily updates disappear from the headlines. But for the people who loved him, the story doesn't quiet down. It settles in. It changes shape. It becomes something they live with every day. At the center of it all is a family forced to navigate life without the man who should have come home from a simple test drive. A husband, a father, a son, someone who didn't wander into danger, someone who opened his driveway to strangers because that's what decent people do. The community around them feels the loss too. Candlelight vigils, long lines of neighbors bringing food, cards, small gestures that never feel like enough. Streets that once felt safe now carry a quiet, uneasy memory. And beyond this town, the case reshapes conversations across the country. about online marketplaces, about meeting strangers, about how quickly an ordinary moment can flip into something irreversible. But there's another layer, the part people learn only after the trial ends, the part investigators piece together over months of work, a truth that still feels unreal when spoken out loud. By the time he met these men, they had already taken lives. A young woman named Laura Babcock, who vanished in the summer. A father, Wayne Millard, whose death was staged to look like something. It wasn't violence that didn't begin in a driveway. It only surfaced there. Tim's story is the one the country knows best, but it's also the one that reveals the pattern, the one that forces people to ask how far back this trail really went, and how it stayed hidden for so long. Years later, the legal side of this case sits in appellate decisions and court summaries, rulings preserved in archives, studied by law students, cited by judges. The convictions hold, the appeals fail, and the men responsible serve life sentences inside concrete walls far from the world they once moved through so easily. But legal endings aren't emotional endings. For those who knew Tim Bosma, there's a quieter truth. He deserved to grow old. He deserved to watch his child grow up. He deserved to come back up that driveway and turn the key in his own front door. Instead, a community is left holding the weight of a story that started small and ended enormous. One that reminds people that darkness doesn't always arrive with warning, and that the most ordinary moments can be the ones that change everything. And as time moves on, his family carries Tim's memory forward, not defined by the men who took his life, but by the life he lived and the love he left behind. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for staying with us after the episode. We always appreciate it when you take a few extra minutes to wind down these stories with us, especially after cases that sit as heavily as this one. I think we both felt the weight of this one in the studio.
We did. And welcome back from me as well. Some cases have a way of lingering, and this is one of them. I kept thinking while we were recording how quickly everything unfolded for that family. There was no warning, no gradual build. One moment life felt normal, and the next, everything was upside down.
What hit me hardest was how familiar that first part of the story is. Selling a vehicle online, meeting someone in your driveway, that's something almost all of us have done without a second thought. There's something unsettling about realizing how easily an everyday moment can change its shape.
And I think that's why this case stayed with so many people. There's no sense of this happened because of some extreme situation. It wasn't a dangerous job or a risky lifestyle or anything like that. It was just regular life. And that's what made communities across the country pay attention.
The community response was something too. You don't always see people rally in such a unified way. Volunteers out searching, neighbors checking security cameras, people bringing food to the house. It says a lot about how deeply this hit the region, even before everyone understood the full picture.
And when the full picture did come out, that was another shock. Learning that the men involved weren't acting on impulse, that this wasn't the first time violence had entered their lives, gave the case a completely different dimension. It turned into something far more disturbing than anyone expected.
That's the part I still think about. You imagine the investigation starting from scratch, and then suddenly it opens up into this larger story that stretches back months. You realize the people involved weren't strangers to harm. They'd already crossed lines most of us can't even imagine.
And yet, even with all that complexity, the trial cut through a lot of the noise. The evidence was clear. The jury saw the contradictions, the shifting stories, the attempts to put responsibility on each other. It wasn't a simple process, but the outcome reflected what the investigators already knew.
I was also thinking about something else while we recorded. How cases like this reshape small habits. People started being more careful about selling things online. They told friends where they were going. They met buyers in parking lots instead of driveways. It's strange how one tragedy can echo through the everyday choices people make.
And the family, I think about them most. They didn't choose to become maybe part of a national story. They didn't choose the spotlight. But they handled everything with so much strength. Even now, years later, their words still carry a quiet kind of courage that's hard to put into words.
Yeah, the case may be settled in court, but for them, it's an ongoing reality. That's something we try to keep in mind every time we tell these stories. There's a responsibility to handle them with care, especially when the people at the center are still living with the aftermath.
And if you want to talk more about this episode or share your own thoughts, you can find us on all our social platforms. We really do read what you send. Your messages help shape what we cover next and how we tell these stories. It means a lot to us.
Thanks again for spending your time with us. See you next Monday, and until then, take care of each other.